Coming up on 2.5 Geeks, we're going to be talking about the Oculus Rift VR system. Then we'll hit some Intel Developers Forum, some new iPhones, and a whole lot more.
The bar has been set wicked fast. It rocked in the benchmarks. We're going to up the ante a little bit.
Processing power, I kind of understand this. Welcome back to 2.5 Geeks. I'm Ayaz Akhtar alongside HotHardware's own Marco Chiappetta and Dave Altavilla. How are you guys doing? Let's ask Dave first. How are you doing?
I'm doing spectacular this evening, and how are you, young Ayaz?
I'm doing quite well. I'm aging, so I'm getting rid of that first that adjective there. How are you doing, Mr. Chiappetta?
I'm doing good. I am just back from San Francisco, and next week I head to Hawaii to see some new stuff.
Some nude stuff? Excuse me? What was that?
Nude stuff and new stuff.
Nice.
Perfect.
Very good for you. I guess let's jump into technology. I guess the nude stuff is a different kind of hot hardware. Let's go to the Oculus Rift VR system. You guys have an eyes on or eyes in or whatever the heck you want to say, I guess, adjacent to a screen. I've seen the ridiculous old prototype held together with duct tape. What did you guys find out, Dave?
Well, if you're looking at nude stuff through this, it's going to get real, as the saying goes. But actually, we had one of our sleuths on the scene. Brian was reporting at PAX Prime for us 2013 this year and got some hands-on time with the Oculus Rift. And it is significantly more refined. This is a virtual reality gaming headset, or actually, it's really not even necessarily a gaming headset. It's all sorts of different applications you can think of for this technology, but a virtual reality headset. And very impressive technology, to say the least. Turns certainly the gaming paradigm on its ear. Lots of additional field of view. You get this 110-degree extra wide field of view, and you actually very much feel immersed in the world. If you look to the farthest edge of the displays, and you intentionally try and find the edge, you actually can see it. But normal, forward view, just walking around in a virtual world, let's say, it literally feels, horizontally and vertically like you are completely surrounded and immersed in the world. So an impressive technology, and Brian was lucky enough to be able to step into Oculus VR's booth and strap one of these things on. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, from what I was reading, the idea is you probably want to be seated when you're using this. The idea of looking around a cockpit in a car or an airplane seems fine, but apparently walking around could lead to disastrous results.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, and certainly there's been different gadgets and setups that have been engineered to go along with these things. We've seen treadmills, by the way, 360-degree treadmills with people strapping on an Oculus Rift and then walking around safely in this sort of caged treadmill area so they don't bump into walls. And obviously, if you're in a virtual world and it's completely around you and you're walking around the real world that's outside, you could just walk off a cliff or walk into a wall or traffic or something like that. It's a bad idea. So, but really, it's an impressive technology, and our editor actually, experienced a couple of different genres with it. Certainly racing. Now you're in a cockpit. It's a very sort of confined environment, and you look around and you can see different views outside of your windshield. A little bit behind you. You can see like the seat and the straps, and it just makes the whole experience that much more real. What it feels like in a first-person shooter, or maybe a role-playing game or something where you're actually a character walking around freely in a world, it's a totally different ball of wax, because now you're talking about certainly you have that field of view, but even simple things need to be re-engineered versus what we're used to in a standard sort of gaming environment. Things like, let's say, your inventory menu, which normally comes up on the screen as a flat menu of objects. Well, it looks okay. It's just this little panel that sticks up in front of you in your virtual world. But wouldn't it be better, and it can be built this way, if you just look down and see what you are holding in your hands, or maybe it's strapped across your belt or something like that. So there's this whole plethora of I guess opportunity that's now available with this sort of field of view, with this whole different perspective of being immersed in the world, where you can engineer a game title to really take advantage of a virtual environment. And so it's an impressive technology with lots of potential. But certainly some drawbacks. There's some other little things with it too. Like, our editor Brian mentioned having that feeling of quote unquote tickle tummy. Well, yeah, guess what? You're looking down over a cliff and, things start to get, real. I mean, you're looking at, height and movement and, all this different stuff from within the game, not in front of you. And it's that much more immersive and real. And so speed and depth and distance and all of that is just, it impacts you from all angles.
I don't know. I hear it's going to be like $300, $400 to feel kind of motion sick in my own house. I could just spin in a chair. It's much cheaper.
Exactly. Or go to, Six Flags and, $5 for a ride or whatever. But no, it could be some pretty cool stuff. And I think the motion sickness or whatever, they'll get a handle on that pretty quickly, I would imagine.
Yeah, Oculus Rift comes with 3 or 4 barf bags, I hear, once it comes out next year, I hear. But I'm making that up. Anyway, let's talk about Intel Developers Forum. It just happened. Marco, you were in San Francisco to check out a whole bunch of things. All kinds of Intel actually showing off a working 14-nanometer Broadwell, the next generation of the Core series.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a ton of stuff at IDF. To give a little backstory, IDF's usually full of surprises, and we don't get too many pre-briefs. There's lots of sort of private meetings and unveilings there. But this year, we were pre-briefed on Bay Trail. We had some information before we got there. There was an embargo in place on some of the Bay Trail stuff. So we thought I thought IDF was going to be the Bay Trail show, and there weren't going to be too many surprises. But when we got there, the very first day, the very first keynote, Intel's new CEO, Brian Krzanich, I thought he did a fantastic job with the opening keynote. He's very even-keeled. Doesn't seem like the type of guy that's going to do anything rash or crazy. He's not going to have a Ballmer developers moment running across the stage. Was a real good speaker, I thought. And while he was on stage for the opening day keynote, he just happened to unveil a system that was up and running Windows 8, fully operational, with a 14-nanometer Broadwell processor. And if you're unfamiliar with Broadwell, it's the follow-on to Haswell, which was recently released, but shrunk down to 14 nanometers. So a lower power part, potentially higher clocks. There's no real information to disclose yet. But it was great to see 14 nanometer already working in that early demo at IDF. It was pretty cool.
Now, he also showed off a 22-nanometer smartphone. Intel not exactly known for its smartphone business, or at least being in smartphones. Do you see any potential partners? Did they talk about anything? Because I think Motorola is like one of the few companies that actually uses an Intel chip.
Right. See, I think Intel is in a funky spot right now in terms of smartphones. The Bay Trail processor and next gen follow up to that, they're looking really strong. However, Intel hasn't had a good LTE modem to this point, or actually any good LTE modem to pair with their processor. So that was one of the many things holding them back from gaining traction in the smartphone space. But in addition to showing off a smartphone with a 22-nanometer Atom-based processor inside, they also showed off a new LTE modem that could do carrier aggregation. So on stage live with a smartphone in hand, they were monitoring bandwidth to this particular phone. And they didn't say which network it was, but it was without the carrier aggregation on. It was pulling 35 megabits. They flipped it on, and all of a sudden this prototype phone was pulling 70 megabits out of the air. And they're thinking by next year they can get that up to 140 megabits. Nice. So it seems that Intel is definitely on the right track, and they're serious about getting into smartphones.
So when it came to other processors, there was the tinier than Atom Quark. I read an interview with Intel President Renee James, and she was like, "It's so nerdy. I love the naming convention because, Core, Atom, Quark. Apart from the name, what's cool about the Quark?"
So the Quark is interesting. It's a really tiny x86 core. The Quark X1000 that was shown on stage, it's 1/5 the size of Atom at 1/10 the power. So it's a really low power, lower performing than Atom core. But what's more interesting about Quark is that it's fully synthesizable. I can probably get that word out right. And what Intel is going to offer with Quark is if a company has third-party IP that they want to incorporate onto the chip, Quark has attach points in a standard fabric where people will be able to attach their IP to the Quark cores, and Intel will manufacture it. So it's kind of not only a way to sell a new low power core for whatever kind of device, it's also a way for Intel to use some of the unused capacity in their fabs and make a little money that way as well.
Now, this is highly
I'd
unusual.
jump
for Intel,
in there and offer that I think it's also the beginning of Intel's play to compete with ARM, obviously, as well, selling that IP and certainly a manufacturing prowess and access that ARM doesn't have. Actually, ARM just sells the IP; they don't manufacture the chips. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch, and it could be very interesting to see what that leads to down the road.
Yeah, well, see, this is why I thought Krasanich might have been a little bit nuts for doing something like that. This is unusual for Intel. I don't believe there's anything else that's ever done this, unless I'm wrong, Marco. Or at least it's not in recent memory that they have allowed this kind of, not even like open discussions. This is like they make a processor, you buy it. That's pretty much usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. This is as far as I'm aware, the first fully synthesizable core from Intel, and this is the first time that they're allowing their x86 cores to be paired with third-party IP on a single piece of silicon that they manufacture. So who knows what this is gonna open up for Intel. It's definitely an interesting time.
And I noticed in the rundown for today on IDF week or weekend, wherever how long it was, that the actual conference, AMD snuck in news. How does that even work?
So it's anytime the tech press is in town for something, all of the competitors to whatever company is hosting the main event kind of glom on to try to get some of your time. And of course, while I was out there meeting with Intel, I also met with NVIDIA and AMD and a few other companies. So AMD was showing off some tablet design wins, many laptops running their APUs, but amidst their demos, there was a Kaveri system running with an Oculus Rift. Now, it wasn't a crazy high-end demo. It was running like a Unigine engine at low res, something like 800 by 600. But the fact that Kaveri was up and running with the 3D title and the Oculus Rift shows that the processor's coming along. There were rumors that it's going to be delayed much later than AMD originally said, but it was confirmed at my meeting. They are still planning to release Kaveri end of this year for availability early next year.
Let's move on to the new version of Atom, Bay Trail. Now, when it comes to Atom processors, a lot of us remember them from netbooks, and we're like, yeah, you got battery life, and it's kind of a computer. It's pretty slow, but there's battery life. Now, the new version of Atom is supposed to have something called, I think it's called good performance. Is this right, Dave?
Yeah, it's actually impressive performance actually for Atom, to be honest with you. And you're talking about a new 22 nanometer technology now, that 3D Tri-Gate technology that Intel has been evangelizing for the past year or so. And it is the new buffed out and beefed up Atom. So now you're talking about an Atom core that scales up to 2.4 gigahertz turbo. It is a quad-core device without hyperthreading. It's a one-to-one core-to-thread association there, so no hyperthreading. It is an out-of-order engine, so that is the first for the Atom family of processors, out-of-order execution engine. So it will optimize execution of instructions efficiently, more efficiently, at least theoretically. And in practice, we actually realized that it was significantly faster clock for clock than the previous generation Atom Clover Trail platform, and an impressive chip for the mobile space, primarily for tablets, as Marco alluded to. The modem integration isn't quite there, so you're not going to see much of this in the way of handsets. But for tablets and ultra portables, detachables, devices like that, this is an impressive chip. Graphics also beefed up on this as well, and as a result, we were able to see performance in some of the standard Android benchmarks that we look at. That's on par with some of the fastest Android-powered devices on the market these days, or ARM-powered Android devices that are on the market these days, even NVIDIA's latest Tegra 4 chip. So good stuff. And of course, in traditional Windows benchmarks, it was like miles ahead of Clover Trail. I'd have to look up the numbers here specifically, but impressive stuff for Intel.
Now, Marco, you actually had hands-on time with a reference device using that actually ran one of these Bay Trail processors. Excuse me.
Yeah, it was actually
Mouthful
one
for
of
me.
the geekiest things ever in the history of IDF. So it's the day before IDF, I got to spend some time at Intel's headquarters, getting deep dive briefings on Bay Trail, and there was a few hours where people were broken up into groups, and we were allowed to install our own apps. So it wasn't Intel controlled apps. We installed our own stuff, got stuff from the app marketplace, and ran benchmarks. The groups were broken up into two separate groups, and the first group, which I happened to be in, we killed a ton of our time installing all of our apps. So Intel allowed a handful of us to meet up at a hotel suite at night, and they brought all the devices in. So it was like 20 geeks crammed in a room just running as many benchmarks as we could on these Bay Trail tablets. So that was one of the geekiest moments ever. But to speak to the device for a minute, I had my hands on an Android Bay Trail Android device and Windows 8.1 device. It was the same reference platform. 2560 by 1440 screen, all Intel inside, obviously, Bay Trail powered. And in my experience, the Android version was functional. There's definitely lots of work left to do on the software side. It wasn't quite as great an experience as the Windows 8.1 device. The Windows 8.1 device was nearly flawless. It was super fast. It ran very well. And just to go back to what Dave had mentioned, that Bay Trail is a true quad-core device, Intel found that with their really fine-grained clock gating and other power-saving tools with Bay Trail, they could gain more performance per die area by having 4 actual cores than by leveraging hyper-threading as they did with Clover Trail. So with 4 real cores in there, and they're out-of-order cores now, which will mostly outperform in-order cores with modern software, you get a really good experience, surprisingly, from a real low-power part. So Windows 8.1 was running flawlessly on this device. Very smooth touch, obviously. Apps ran really well. And not only did it outperform Clover Trail, but it's competing and beating an A4 APU from AMD, which is their notebook part. So Intel's tablet part can compete with quad-core or AMD mobile notebook parts. It's pretty crazy.
So
we actually looking at some of the benchmark numbers now that we stepped through in this review. You actually see where Bay Trail is over twice as fast in general compute versus a previous generation Clover Trail product, and in graphics, it blows it out of the water. It's not even in the same league. And so, literally, what you see, certainly in standard Windows testing, is just this huge leap in performance, and so it's impressive. And then when you stack it up in our Android testing versus devices like the Galaxy Note 2, the Nexus 7, Google Nexus 7 recently introduced, this is current generation stuff, and then future generation stuff like NVIDIA Shield, which really is only available, the Tegra 4, which is only available on NVIDIA Shield currently, hanging with that as well from a graphics standpoint. So kudos to Intel for stepping it up a notch with Bay Trail, and it will be interesting to see here in Q4, those products are going to be shipping. Interesting to see what those tablets look like and what performance is like. If it's any indication with the experience that Marco had, it's going to be a happy Q4 season for Intel-based tablets.
With the waning popularity of PC, the form factor, laptops, I'm thinking Intel's trying to get into the tablet space as much. I'm really curious about the way that Android tablet performed, or hearing that it wasn't as good as an 8.1 experience.
Right.
So that seems like that Intel obviously trying to get into every which way. I believe Quark might end up in smartwatches and other smaller devices. If the Atom is any good, it could be in things like Chromebooks. Who knows where it'll end up? Because there's a lot of cheap machines out there nowadays. It's going to be kind of hard to differentiate.
Speaking of cheap IaaS, I'm sorry to interrupt. One of the things that Krzanich mentioned on stage at IDF was this holiday season, there will be sub $100 Bay Trail based mobile devices. I don't know exactly what device. I don't know how fast that Bay Trail chip's going to be, but he said sub $100. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I read
That's
that
dirt
quote.
cheap.
That seems insane to me. Also, though, you're gonna get you get what you pay for. Because I remember netbooks getting really cheap, but boy,
Yeah,
did they
obviously.
get chintzy when it comes to build quality. So while even if you can put a low end processor in there, which is still really amazing compared to the last generation stuff, if the display is crap, or if the keyboard stinks, or if there's no keyboard, sorry, we're talking about tablets here. If if the touchscreen is no good, people might not want to buy this, or at least it'd be that price point. You go $99. Oh, I can get that one for $129, $159, and then before you know it, you're paying $400 for a real tablet, perhaps.
Yeah.
Speaking of tablets that are expensive or companies that like to make expensive products, let's talk about Apple, because I think they came out with 2 new iPhones or sort of thing. There's an iPhone 5C, there's the 5S, and iOS 7. Everything coming up pretty soon. September 18th, iOS 7 drops. I believe the iPhone 5S doesn't actually have pre-orders. You got to go to the store to get it, and the 5C pre-orders I think are already open. What is your take on this?
Well, I'll jump in, and you guys can spitball this around with me. To me, it looks like Apple's just catching up. They've laid the foundation with the A7 for future generation products. I think that was a good move for them. 64-bit processor, 64-bit ARM core based processor, a system on a chip. I think that's a good foundation for future generation products. The rest of it, frankly, in my opinion, was a yawn. You're talking about an 8-megapixel iSight camera now with f2.2 aperture. Okay. Really, the Touch ID system, that's interesting. Fingerprint scanner, that's novel. But not a lot of breakout features that I am wowed by. They talk about better multitasking. They talk about a lot of different features built into whether it be the interface or the hardware that is really catch up to what's already on the market, whether it be your high-end Android devices like the Samsung Galaxy S4 or even LG's Optimus G Pro or the G2. You're talking about catch up here, in my opinion, on a lot of levels for Apple. Although I like that A7, that 64-bit processor, it's a good foundation, it's a good start. I think certainly the press and the market was expecting more. A larger screen would have been, great for starters.
Marco, what's your take on the on either phone?
So I have a couple of things, just random thoughts that pop into my head. First, I love how people are trying now to explain how innovative Apple is for making a plastic phone, considering how much crap they gave other companies. Really, not even being funny. I'm friends with something like 1,000 people on Facebook, and lots of them are industry people. And seeing responses to the 5C on how innovative it is, I was shocked. I think it's great that Apple is trying to make a lower priced iPhone, but then it wasn't really that much lower price. So I don't really understand what they're doing. Maybe they're going to make more money off it, but my impression leading up to the release was that the plastic iPhone was going to be more affordable for maybe emerging markets, and it doesn't seem like that's the case. Now with the 5S, the fingerprint scanner is a cool feature. It's not Apple is not first with that, by the way. I had a Moto Atrix a couple of years ago with a fingerprint scanner built in. So don't think Apple did it first, but their design is really nice. It's happening at a bad time with all this, all the NSA news recently. I think people are going to be leery about having their fingerprints stored on their devices. Apple is saying they're not going to be put up in the cloud. But if you really think about it, that's one huge database of usernames and fingerprints should they want to be used nefariously. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. In terms of the device, I really wish Apple would innovate with the design. The iPhone 5 is nice, but when you look at it next to some of the more recently released devices like the HTC One or the Galaxy S4, it's too small now. I don't care what anybody says. It's too small now versus some of the leading-edge Android devices. And it looks the same as last year's device. The 64-bit processor, yes, it lays the foundation, and it may open up some interesting things years down the road when software is optimized for it, but it's not going to mean a whole heck of a lot now. So there's lots of concerns, and I guess it's sort of showing in the slide of the stock price.
Yeah, jumping in on that security hook, I think even beyond just sending out that fingerprint to the cloud, whether or not that happens, if your device gets hacked or compromised somehow, and let's face it, it'll be done. Someone will figure it out. Your fingerprint's out there, and that can't be a good thing. Maybe I'm all wet. Maybe there's an encryption method here that just can't be broken, and I'm sure Apple will secure that. But the community will probably figure it out.
When it comes to the 5C,
the bad community.
The 5C doesn't have the fingerprint sensor, just the higher end 5S.
Yes.
That's also the one that's the only one that has that new A7 64-bit processor.
Right.
Apple definitely keeping the lines distinct. Somebody compared this to the MacBook line versus the MacBook Pro line. It's starting to look that way. You got the plastic one, you got the metal one. The old MacBooks used to be plastic, if you forgot that a long time ago. Now they're all metal.
Yeah.
It could be a differentiation strategy. The color move, I think Nokia made fun of them for that. They're like, hey, polycarbonate, what a great idea. Good camera? It's like, hey, we kind of thought that's a good idea too. A lot of the stuff seems catch up to me too. But the thing is, if Apple doesn't catch up, they're going to be falling behind, right? So this 5S and 5C are they're obviously the rest stop until the 6. The 6 will probably have a larger screen, because how many times can you tell developers, hey, rewrite your apps. We're having a new operating system. So iOS 7, we want new stuff. With that change, I think that's asking developers a lot. If they change screen sizes and up the resolution, you have to make sure that the SDK allows for different resolutions, because now you're starting to fragment your own audience. So I think Apple's really slow when it comes to that, because they're afraid of taking off their large developer base, considering Android has so many different platforms, so many different phones. Why would you stick to iOS if you could just write for Android, especially with their new SDKs? So it's a small and yet yawn-worthy step, I think.
Yeah,
one more quick point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, jump in.
Let me say
what's
just
your
one more
quick point?
It seems like all three of us had some criticism here, but in the end, Apple's going to sell more of them than every other smartphone. It's still going to sell like crazy.
It's still a nice phone. It's not like it's like, oh, this is not the LG Optimus V of phones. It's the iPhone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Marco. I mean, they're going to sell like hotcakes no matter what. And what's interesting and what you have to give Apple credit for is marketing and owner and user. I guess cultivation of user base. They maintain customers like nobody's business. They get you in, they get their hooks in you, and then they deliver. They deliver a quality product and service to go with it, the whole ecosystem and the platform to go with it. That keeps you there. And so you got to give them credit where credit's due. They've got a very passionate fan base, a very passionate user base. And I experienced it firsthand. I wrote a little column at Forbes, actually, on the A7 and the 64-bittedness, if that's a word, of that processor and how innovative it is. It certainly is a good first step and definitely an innovative step in the handset arena. But folks are thinking that this is a 64-bit processor, and so automatically it's going to be twice as fast as a 32-bit processor, right? No, it's not that simple. It doesn't quite work that way. You're talking about, additional instruction set expansion and registers and things like that. You're not talking about memory bandwidth, doubling your memory bandwidth right out of the chute. It just doesn't work that way. It's not an efficient scaling, 2x performance for 64-bit processor and a 64-bit OS. As a matter of fact, in some cases, it's not going to be as fast, and there are some certain applications where it's going to be faster for sure. It's a good platform move for Intel, or excuse me, for Apple rather. You're talking about a platform for the future, and you can see where they're going to be able to build off this and take it to the next level. But for this iteration of the phone, and I know they wheeled out, who was the game developer that they wheeled out to do the 64-bit game demo? Infinity Blade, was it?
Infinity Blade was the game. I don't know who the developer is.
That was the game, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, so I mean, they're always going to bring out the proof of concept vehicle, and here's an endorsement and all that, guaranteed. And we'll have to see what the numbers look like when we benchmark this thing, 64-bit versus 32-bit mode, and if there's a way to look at that cleanly, by the way, between identical workloads or similar workloads running in 64 or 32-bit mode. But I can't see there being a huge quantum leap in performance just for a 64-bit. I think there's going to be a big performance jump between generations of processor, but that performance jump comes from the other enhancements to the core, not the fact that it's just a 64-bit core and OS. What do you think about that, Marco?
I think you're right. Software has to be, you need the 64-bit OS, true 64-bit software, something to leverage the CPU cores themselves to really show the benefit. If you just to go back in the old PC days when AMD released the Athlon 64, its performance gains came by way of the architecture, not because it was a 64-bit processor. It was years later that we've switched to 64-bit OSs, where they became normal and above 4 gigs of memory, where you can address it. 32-bit can only address 4 gigs of memory. 64-bit can do much more.
Right.
So yeah, there's lots that has to happen before that 64-bit means a lot across the board. And I want to make one more quick point. I know we're running long here. You say we need to give credit where credit is due, and Apple does great at marketing and all that stuff, which is all true. But and I'm not saying all Apple fans. I'm not saying all Apple fans. I'm looking in the camera, not all of you. There is
It's coming, here it comes.
There's a large group of Apple fans that no matter what Apple does, it's great. These same people that were ripping tons of Android manufacturers for having plasticky phones, now plastic's good, and it's not because Apple's doing something special with the plastics. It's because Apple used plastic. It's those fans. It's fanboyism, and that's the only way to explain it.
Fanboyism is alive and well, pretty much wherever you go. People love to think that their decision is right. If they part with money or anything, they must be right. And I don't care. I mean, whatever does the job. I mean, if Apple rewrites their OS with a 64-bit processor makes more sense and things work well and you get battery life or all kinds of performance increases that you can get because they have all of that control compared to somebody like Samsung, who did announce they are going to have 64-bit processors in the future. It's about having that system work. Whether it's plastic or not is a whole other thing, and people are going to love and hate constantly. And anything else before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, just quickly, because it showed up today, and I don't even have the model number memorized, but this just showed up. This is a brand new Intel Haswell-based NUC system. So it looks a little smaller than last year's, definitely more connectivity. I will reveal more soon when I plug it in and test it out.
Do you have the box?
Oh, I do. Let's see if it works, though.
Okay.
I think I jinxed it earlier.
Try it.
Here's part of the box. Let's see if it works. It didn't work! Yay!
Okay, so if you open up that flap again, we can actually see what looks like a doorbell or some kind of little speaker.
Yeah, so there's a little thing that was playing the Intel jingle, and it's not working every time, so I don't know what's up with it.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, we're talking about the cult of Apple. That's the way you do it. You have a little jingle when you open up a box, and you're like, yes, I know that sound. It's like when I buy something. Amazon should get on this.
What would be even better if you hacked the boxes before it shipped and some little kid opens it and it says, "Kill your mother." That would be awesome.
You're right. That's probably
That's not
why
very nice.
It won't happen. That's a shame. But it'd be interesting to see. I guess that would be a great security story to cover. I'd love to cover that. It's like,
oh wait, let me try it again. Let me try it again. Hold on. Kill your mother. Oh, hey, it worked.
all right.
We have completely devolved now, haven't we?
Yes, but if you want to evolve or revolve or whatever it is, evolve, you can go to HotHardware.com because the stories that you guys have written out, the reviews, the performance benchmarks, everything you got there is done in a straight-laced manner with some humor. You guys are on the rails at HotHardware.com. And if you wondered about any of the stuff we talked about, guess what? Everything we talked about was at HotHardware.com. Surprise!
Go figure.
Yeah, secret word. There should be ducks falling and confetti. But anyway, if people wanted to go around the web and not see ducks, where could they go? What if they want to see like a blue bird and hot hardware content? Dave, you got anything like a blue bird and a short characters?
That bird might be tweeting, perhaps.
Yes.
Yes, that would be twitter.com/hothardware. Okay. Don't you know?
If you wanted to see skateboarding dogs and then you wanted to look at hot hardware videos, where would you do that, Marco?
Skateboarding dogs.
YouTube.com/HotHardwareVids.
If you wanted to see pictures of everybody's kids and then you wanted to see hot hardware and you still like the color blue on the top, where should they go, Dave?
Facebook.com/HotHardware. Yeah, that's it. With lots of pictures of Marco's kids.
What if you like a black thing on the top instead of blue?
I had such a bad joke I wanted to tell right there, but I'm not going to do it.
One day off the air.
You were going to crucify me, probably.
No, I wasn't. I'll say it off the air.
Anyway, the black strip I was talking about is Google Plus. You can go to Google Plus and search for Hot Hardware. That's also out there. Was there anything I'm forgetting? I don't know.
Come by the site. That's where you get the real juice. HotHardware.com.
Yeah, and if you don't want to see pictures of kids and skateboarding dogs and this nonsense, HotHardware.com. Unless they're involved in the actual demo, which I don't know.
And subscribe to us on YouTube because we want you here constantly.
Yes, we want you to watch us.
We love you.
We do love you.
Honest.
Let's give you a big hug and pat you in the back and say thank you for stopping by.